the Records and Music podcast, so it's kind of natural that we've spent more time talking about Gorillaz. But, you know, this is obviously a visual category, so it's a good opportunity to speak about Jamie Hewlett and kind of his story, basically. And I don't know if you know Jamie, but he was, you know, a bit of a name back in the 80s because he was the co-creator of a comic strip called Tank Girl, which was centered around a female character called Tank Girl, who, yep, you guessed it, drove a tank around that she also lived with. But yeah, this plot sounds absolutely crazy. She had like a mutant kangaroo boyfriend called Booger. And yeah, interestingly, there was actually a Tank Girl film made in '95, which originally had Steven Spielberg lined up to direct, if you can believe that. But yeah, in the end, he seemed to have dodged a bullet because the film was like a commercial and critical flop, and I think Jamie basically had very little to do with it. But yeah, he was a bit of a big name in the kind of comic art and illustration scene, and he and Damon ended up living in a flat together back in the 90s, where I imagine that they kind of bonded over a disdain for MTV and a bit of a soft spot for heroin. Anyway, this is where the idea for Gorillaz was kind of hatched. Going back to Demon Days, I think this is probably up there as one of the most recognisable covers that that's going to be queuing up for our Nightclub in the series. Obviously, starter packs were not a sensation back in 2005 as much as they are now, but the cover's layout is essentially the same. It's just kind of like 4 square images of the band members, 2D, Murdoch, Noodle and Russell. And to be honest, the cover is a bit of a rip on some other famous albums, maybe most noticeably the Finals Beatles studio album, Let It Be. If you Google that, it looks quite similar. Even the Blur's Greatest Hits compilation is a very similar layout, and it's something that they would return to on Humans. Funnily enough, the concept behind Humans was kind of one last party before the end of the world, and a lot of the music video and artwork are all set in nightclubs and on dance floors. But obviously, we all know there's only one venue that Gorillaz are bothered about getting into, and that is Death with the Records album cover Nightclub. So yeah,
100%.
I'm just going to remind listeners that Jamie and I always end our podcast with the album cover Nightclub segment. So this part of the podcast basically imagines a scenario where the album cover is trying to get into a club, but Jamie and I are the bouncers. And, you know, we're not looking for your standard kind of things, the ID that you've got, the tie you're wearing, the dress you might have put on to try and impress us. No, there's only 4 things that we're bothered about: originality, harmony between music and artwork, aesthetics, and whether or not you could consider the cover to be iconic. Like any nightclub worth its salt, there are 4 ranks. So first of all is GOAT, highest level Hall of Fame. This is like where Michael Jordan's going to be sitting. Second of all, VIP, so not quite GOAT, but still a very respectable cover.
I'll have some bottles of Belvedere in that section, things like that.
Definitely. Third, ticket on the door. You're very, very close to being sent home, so you are pretty lucky that Jamie and I are feeling so generous. And last and least, name's knocked down, not getting in.
Pathetic effort, get out of our sight, etc., etc.
Jamie, what are you thinking?
Right, well, I kind of have an inkling that you're going to try and argue that this is GOAT level. So I'm just going to come in and say, I think it's in on the door, but what happens is they get in on the door, find a ticket, they're in the nightclub, they start hanging around the VIP area, this album cover does, so they end up in VIP. Does that make sense, or is that a bit convoluted?
That does make sense.
So it's like on the borderline between the two. I think, obviously, it's iconic, and as you say, it's very recognisable, but it is essentially a rip-off of like dozens of albums before it that have a similar look. And I actually prefer the Humans cover because I think just the aesthetic's a bit more modern. But what do you think? Are you going to try and argue for GOAT or what?
I think with the exception of the Now, I think the group have pretty consistent album covers. I really like the debut. Demon Days I think is cool, and Plastic Beach is pretty cool as well. And I think actually if we were kind of questioning this, you know, it would be a pretty bad reflection on Jamie Hewlett's contribution to the band in general.
It's probably got to be VIP, isn't it? I mean, the band literally has a person who draws for the band with them. If they can't make a good album cover, then
I would go VIP.
Do you think it's close to getting GOAT level, or is it just VIP?
I think just VIP.
Yeah, go on then. VIP. We let him in VIP.
Nice one.
Get the Belvedere. Well, I mean, I guess that brings us to an end. The album cover Nightclub is becoming more and more populated by the day. The VIP section is popping off. We hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Please give us a like and comment any questions you may have. Subscribe, and most importantly, follow us on the socials at Death for the Record. Instagram, particularly this week, is going to have some
quality content.
Yeah, some quality content. All the Shaun Ryder memes you could possibly imagine. So yeah, get on that, and we'll see you next week.